She didn't look like a threat. That's what made their mistake so loud. A dusty Georgia gas station, mid-afternoon, the kind of place where the summer heat turns asphalt into syrup and glances last longer than they should. She stepped out of a silver SUV, hood streaked with pollen, tires humming low like a long-distance traveler, and the moment her foot hit the pavement, the first comment flew. Loud enough to be accidental. One of them, a local mechanic in a grease-stained cap, nudged his buddy and said, "She lost or just looking for trouble?" They laughed. So did the off-duty cop sipping from a giant soda cup, arms crossed over his badge-print tee like he owned the county. The woman didn't flinch. No comeback. No visible anger. Just a steady walk toward the convenience store door, her purse slung low, her gaze fixed. The cashier, a man with mirrored sunglasses on indoors, stopped her before she could enter. "Bathrooms for customers only," he muttered, though no one else had been stopped that day. Behind her, the men kept commenting. Casual cruelty, dressed as jokes. They joked about drugs, about food stamps. One even mimed locking his car. But the SUV she drove wasn't random, and neither was she. What no one realized was that the woman they were mocking was already investigating this exact corner of the county. For months. She wasn't here for gas. She was here for civil rights violations, for racial profiling, and for evidence of local corruption bleeding through small-town systems. What those men didn't know, what the body cam footage would later capture in brutal detail, was that the woman they'd just humiliated had already built a case against them. She wasn't a stranger. She was their shadow, and the entire gas station security camera system, it had been replaced 2 weeks ago by federal order. But in that moment, no one knew anything. To the world, she was just another black woman treated with disregard, dismissed without cause. Just another day. Just another laugh at someone else's expense. Except this time it wasn't just wrong, it was evidence. By sundown, 2 of the men would be in federal custody. The cashier would be subpoenaed. And that off-duty cop? He'd soon watch a video of himself go viral, played in courtrooms, newsrooms, and every police misconduct investigation seminar for the next decade. All because they misjudged a woman who never raised her voice, never flinched, and never once had to say the 3 letters stitched inside her coat pocket, FBI. Talia Monroe had spent the last 12 years in federal law enforcement, but this assignment felt different. Not because it was more dangerous. She'd worked undercover operations before, infiltrated gangs, even posed as a criminal defense paralegal in a RICO case. But because this one was personal. No backup. No microphone in her ear, just a beat-up SUV, a prepaid flip phone, and a fake Georgia driver's license that said she was born in a town that didn't exist anymore. She rented a 1-bedroom unit on the edge of Miller County, the kind of place where the streetlights buzzed louder than the traffic and everyone knew who didn't belong. And Talia? She didn't belong. That was the point. To the residents, she was just another outsider drifting through, someone down on her luck maybe, or looking to disappear. She dressed the part, wore faded jeans, a plain jacket, and no makeup. She let her curls fall in loose, unstyled coils and kept her head down in public. But her eyes missed nothing, especially around the Sinclair gas station just off Route 319. It wasn't just a pit stop. It was a hub. Talia had been watching that place for weeks. It wasn't just the offhand comments or the way locals got treated based on skin tone. It was something deeper, something coordinated. Truckers would pull in, hand off sealed packages to station employees. Local cops would show up, stay too long without reason, then disappear down back roads no patrol had business on. Teenagers whispered about being followed, pulled over, intimidated into silence. One high school senior had even confessed, anonymously, that her brother had been caught with an ounce of marijuana, then walked free without charges, but only after handing over $300 in cash. No receipt, no record, just hush. Talia suspected a wide-ranging civil rights violation scheme hiding beneath the surface of small-town charm. But what made it dangerous wasn't just the abuse of power. It was the culture of silence that protected it. This wasn't a place where people spoke freely. It was a place where people disappeared into resignation. And that's exactly why the Bureau had chosen her. She'd been placed on a special task force within the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, aimed at exposing networks of systemic abuse in rural law enforcement, places where oversight was thin and accountability thinner. These were operations where you didn't carry a badge in your pocket. You carried it in your silence. Every glance you endured, every insult you let pass, became a breadcrumb in a larger trail leading toward federal prosecution. Her daily routine became surgical. She fueled up at the gas station every 3 days, always at different times. She bought coffee from the same fridge cooler each morning and paid in exact cash. She left no pattern but kept a quiet presence. She'd sit in her car for hours sometimes, pretending to nap, while a hidden dash camera recorded movement around the station. Sometimes she pretended to lose something, giving her a reason to circle back inside. Sometimes she simply stood in line, letting the tension brew, absorbing how certain customers were greeted with "Hey, bud," while others got watched like shadows. She'd already identified 3 key players. First, Officer Jim Radley, the off-duty cop from the soda cup moment. His patrol logs were full of holes, but his truck had been caught on camera outside the station at least 14 times, always off shift. Second, Curtis Haynes, the mechanic who laughed the loudest. Haynes ran a body shop next door and was rumored to fix more than just cars. Talia noticed that vehicles with out-of-state plates would often disappear into his garage for hours before reappearing with clean titles and fresh tags. And third, Debbie Sloan, the station manager who never said a word, but always seemed to be watching from behind mirrored glass. Talia filed weekly encrypted reports back to Quantico, tagging surveillance clips with metadata and flagging suspicious behavior for further analysis. She wasn't here to make arrests, not yet. She was here to build an airtight case, one that would hold up in federal court, withstand every press conference, and break a chain of corruption that had flourished in plain sight for over a decade. But the deeper she went, the more personal it became. One morning, she witnessed a young black woman being refused a receipt after paying cash for fuel. When she asked why, the cashier smirked and said, "Don't need to give receipts for stolen money." The girl looked stunned, humiliated, and Talia fought the instinct to speak up, not because she didn't care, but because blowing her cover too soon could cost everything. Every slight, every denial, every coded phrase disguised as local humor, Talia absorbed it all. Her body became a sensor for injustice. She learned to breathe through rage, to nod instead of protest, to walk away when every cell in her body wanted to confront. But she wasn't just collecting moments. She was collecting evidence of racial discrimination, abuse of authority, and patterns of police misconduct too calculated to be accidental. What kept her grounded was the mission. She wasn't just there to take down one dirty cop or close one corrupt gas station. She was there to expose a machine, a system that relied on humiliation to protect its power. A system that mocked women like her, then panicked when those same women held the keys to its downfall. And every time someone smirked, rolled their eyes, or made a comment meant to make her feel small, Talia smiled inside. Because they were walking straight into her investigation. One gas receipt, one camera frame, one arrogant mistake at a time. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the pattern finally broke. Talia had grown used to the rhythm, officers rotating in and out of the station's back lot, employees pretending not to notice, vehicles appearing with tinted windows and leaving without license plates. But that day, something shifted. A black pickup pulled in just before 3 p.m., its tailgate dragging slightly, as if weighed down. 2 men got out, neither of them regulars she'd seen before, but one caught her eye. He wore a Miller County Sheriff's jacket, though she knew for a fact he wasn't on the official roster. She'd memorized it. This wasn't sloppiness. This was signaling. Someone was flexing fake authority in public daylight, and no one around seemed surprised. That's when Talia knew the corruption wasn't isolated. It was layered. They weren't just operating a small-town shakedown. They were laundering identities, cash, even seized property, using fake credentials and real power to move under the radar. She kept her camera rolling from the dash as the two men entered the store. Minutes later, they came out with brown paper bags. No receipts, no interaction with the register. They nodded to the mechanic, who was now suspiciously working on a squad car that didn't belong to anyone on duty. Everything screamed back channel. The kind of back channel that turns a civil rights investigation into a federal criminal conspiracy. That night, Talia compiled her report in near darkness, her laptop screen dimmed, her phone in airplane mode, curtains pulled. She uploaded the footage through a secure FBI portal and flagged the sheriff's jacket for verification. In less than 12 hours, she received a rare, high-priority ping from Quantico. The jacket matched one issued to an officer placed on leave for assault charges in another county. He wasn't just impersonating a cop, he was moving jurisdiction to avoid scrutiny. That was the kind of escalation that made things dangerous, for him and for her. But Talia couldn't stop now, not when the case was finally cracking open. Every piece of digital evidence she collected was building a chain: gas station transactions with no paper trail, facial recognition of known offenders, license plates bouncing between counties, and, most damning, logs of local officers clocked in during confirmed moments of illegal activity. If she pushed just a little further, she could secure what the Bureau called the crown layer, that one piece of irrefutable proof that tied the entire network together. Ironically, it was an act of kindness that gave her the break. A Latina woman named Rosa, who worked part-time at the register and always kept her head down, slipped Talia a note on a gas receipt. It was subtle, scrawled in pencil. "He moves money at closing, behind the ice chest." That was it. No name, no explanation. But Talia understood immediately. Rosa had been watching too, waiting for someone safe enough to trust. That evening, just after sunset, Talia returned to the station and parked under the broken light post where shadows ran long. She waited. At exactly 8:57 p.m., the same sheriff imposter reappeared. He opened the back room, pulled out a small red cooler, and wheeled it toward the ice chest. Then, as casually as someone refilling soda, he popped the lid and began loading sealed packets, white, rectangular, wrapped in heat-sealed plastic. Talia leaned forward, watching through the zoom lens. Drug trafficking, plain and simple, hidden in plain sight. But it wasn't just the drugs, it was how seamlessly law enforcement had been folded into the operation. Officers weren't just turning a blind eye. They were part of the delivery system. Her instincts screamed, this was it, time to call it in. But something about the stillness of the scene made her wait. He wasn't alone. From the side door, Officer Jim Radley emerged. No uniform, just a tank top and jeans, but with the same swagger, the same lazy aggression that had humiliated her that first day. He nodded at the fake sheriff, then reached into the cooler himself, pocketing one packet before walking toward the parking lot. Talia hit record. The frame captured everything: the handoff, the exchange, the location. And when the off-duty cop slid into the same unmarked vehicle she'd seen parked outside the mechanic shop days earlier, the entire chain of evidence snapped shut. She had them, on camera, in conspiracy, using their positions to facilitate criminal enterprise under the guise of local law enforcement. This wasn't just misconduct, this was a federal offense. But the risk was rising fast. She knew that if anyone suspected her identity even for a second, her cover would dissolve, and her safety with it. She'd been warned during briefing, the closer you get to the core, the more likely they are to smell smoke. And tonight, they'd already lit the match. She left without drawing attention, her camera still recording in silent mode. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a nearby church parking lot, swapped the camera's SD card, sealed it in a vacuum case, and mailed it to the bureau using a pre-approved drop box embedded in the back of a gas station map display. The irony wasn't lost on her, hiding truth inside what they thought was trash. Back in her apartment, she didn't sleep. She watched the footage again, then again. Not because she needed to, but because she had to remind herself this wasn't just about busting bad cops. It was about restoring public trust, about holding accountable those who used badges as shields and authority as armor. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. The next morning, the town was unusually quiet. The gas station's shutters stayed down until noon. Officer Radley's cruiser was gone. The mechanic's garage was closed for maintenance. That's when she knew. Someone had felt her heat. Someone had either seen the camera or suspected they were being watched. Either way, she was out of time. But the timing was perfect. Because by then, the Bureau already had what they needed. The storm didn't come with sirens. It came with silence. Talia knew the difference. Real danger doesn't announce itself. It lingers in glances too long and doors that stay half shut. That morning, the entire town moved like it was holding its breath. The gas station opens late. Mechanics Bay is eerily clean. No patrol cars idling on the usual corner. Just heat rising from the blacktop and tension hanging like humidity. Something had shifted, and not in her favor. Talia had planned to lie low after mailing the evidence. Let the Bureau move in its own time. But when she walked out of her apartment, her SUV had been tampered with. Not stolen, not damaged, just entered. Her glove compartment was slightly open. The dash camera lens had been turned inward. Subtle. Controlled. A message. They knew. Or at least suspected. Either way, her cover was fraying. She couldn't risk staying silent anymore. She activated her encrypted burner and sent a one-line message. It's go time. She decided to play boldly. She returned to the gas station at high noon. Same SUV, same face, same calm. She walked inside and grabbed a soda from the cooler. Debbie Sloan, the silent manager, was behind the counter as usual, wearing that same lifeless expression. But when Talia handed over a 20, Debbie didn't move. Instead, she stared at her. "You don't look like someone who pumps gas for a living," she said. Not an accusation. A test. Talia didn't blink. Neither do you. That was it. A micro standoff. But it was all the confirmation she needed. They were on to her. But what they didn't realize was that undercover operations like hers weren't built on muscle. They were built on timing. And Talia's was down to the second. She got into her SUV and pulled away slowly, knowing eyes were watching. 2 blocks down, the cruiser appeared. No lights. Just a slow roll behind her. Then, flashing reds. She pulled into an empty lot. Officer Jim Radley stepped out, this time in full uniform, even though she knew he wasn't on shift. He tapped her window with his knuckle. "License and registration," he said flatly. She handed over the fake documents the Bureau had provided. He looked at them, then leaned in closer. "You know, for someone not from here, you sure like to look at everything, kind of like someone taking notes." Talia gave a small smile. "Maybe I just have a good memory." Radley's grin vanished. He dropped the act. "Get out of the car." She stepped out slowly, hands visible, calm. He motioned her toward the hood of her SUV, then glanced around. No other cars. No witnesses. He leaned in close. "You know what happens to people who start sniffing around here?" he whispered. "They disappear. Gas station cameras break. Reports get lost. You keep poking around, we'll make you a ghost." Talia said nothing, but in her jacket pocket she had pressed a button on her wristband. The moment he touched her shoulder, the alert pinged. Live transmission. The FBI was listening. "Is that supposed to scare me?" she asked quietly. Radley scoffed. "It's not supposed to, it just will." Before he could speak again, a silver SUV turned the corner. Then another. Then a third. All unmarked. All government plates. Radley stepped back. His jaw twitched. He reached for his radio, but it was already too late. The lead vehicle's door opened and out stepped Special Agent Marcus Kane, Talia's direct supervisor from Quantico. Behind him, a full federal response team in dark vests, marked Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation, fanned out across the block. Kane's voice cut through the summer air like a knife. "James Radley, step away from the woman. She's one of ours." Radley froze. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly he turned toward Talia, eyes wide, lips parted. Disbelief. "You what?" Talia raised an eyebrow. "You really thought I was just here for soda?" Within minutes, chaos unfolded. The FBI executed simultaneous warrants across the town. The gas station, the mechanic shop, Radley's home, even the sheriff's office. Everything Talia had collected, video, audio, documents, was backed by live footage from mobile units and drone surveillance. They moved with precision. Agents retrieved records from false vehicle titles, stacks of unreported cash, evidence of racial profiling, and body cam footage that had been deleted but not permanently wiped. At the gas station, Debbie Sloan was taken into custody. She didn't resist, just stood there watching as they opened her office safe and pulled out packets of narcotics and a second cell phone full of encrypted texts. "You think you're going to get away with this?" she muttered as they cuffed her. Talia walked past, her badge now clipped to her hip. "No, I know we already did." As the sweep expanded, locals began to emerge from homes and stores, drawn to the sirens and black SUVs lining the streets like storm clouds. For the first time in years, the balance of power had visibly shifted. Parents held their children back, whispering. Older folks stood still, arms crossed, watching as uniformed men and women carried out boxes of seized evidence. Phones came out, live streams began. And Talia stood calmly in the middle of it all, no longer invisible, no longer underestimated. People stared at her, not with mockery this time, but disbelief. Respect. A woman they'd scoffed at only days ago had just flipped the entire town on its head. One girl, no older than 16, whispered to her mother, "That's the lady they were laughing at." Her mom replied, "They're not laughing now." Back at the sheriff's station, things were unraveling fast. In the evidence room, agents cracked open a locked metal cabinet that wasn't listed on the department's inventory. Inside, they found cash bundles totaling over $80,000, multiple burner phones, unregistered firearms, and most damning of all, a folder marked ICE holds containing false immigration detainer orders used to intimidate Latino residents without federal backing. This wasn't just a corrupt local unit. It was a small-scale criminal enterprise exploiting both power and prejudice, and now it was collapsing piece by piece under its own weight. As Talia stood outside the gas station, now being secured as a crime scene, her burner rang. It was an encrypted bureau line. She answered. "We've got confirmation," said the voice on the other end. "The money trail links Radley and the station manager to a narcotics network moving product through 4 counties. DEA is ready to step in." Talia nodded, glancing over at Radley, now sitting in the back of a blacked-out SUV, hands cuffed, his face drained of all bravado. "Tell DEA they can take what's left," she said. "My part's done." But before she could turn away, a man in a wrinkled button-down shirt came stumbling out of the crowd, red-faced and furious. It was Councilman Aaron Beckett, one of the town's most vocal public figures, always first to defend his officers, always last to comment on allegations of discrimination. He pointed at Talia and shouted, "This is federal overreach. You don't know what you've done. This town doesn't need the FBI. It needs protection from people like you." The crowd gasped, but Talia didn't flinch. She stepped forward, pulled a small voice recorder from her jacket, and pressed play. A recording crackled to life. Beckett's voice, unmistakable, caught in a conversation days earlier where he discussed letting the drugs pass in exchange for kickbacks from local businesses. The silence was devastating. "You were saying?" she asked, then handed the recorder to the lead agent beside her. Beckett was arrested on the spot. It all happened in under 36 hours. The arrests, the raids, the headlines. By the end of the second day, Talia's footage had gone national. FBI agent uncovers racial profiling and corruption in Georgetown, one network declared. Another showed the viral clip of her being refused service, followed by images of her in full badge and gear leading agents into the gas station. TikTok reels cut between her calm stare during the false traffic stop and the footage of Radley being shoved into the back of a federal van. Hashtags exploded. FBI justice, underestimated woman, systemic corruption, body cam truth. The story struck a nerve, because it wasn't just about one woman. It was about every person who'd ever been profiled, silenced, or made to feel small by someone hiding behind a badge, and this time the person who'd been underestimated held all the receipts. As the agents began packing up, one young black officer, clearly new to the bureau, walked over to Talia and said quietly, "Ma'am, that was masterclass." She smiled, weary but proud. "Justice," she said softly, "doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just listens, then strikes." What the people of that town would never forget wasn't just the arrests. It was the woman they'd once mocked, walking back into that station, not as a suspect, not as a victim, but as the one who ended it all. The case should have been over. With over a dozen arrests, federal indictments pending, and enough digital evidence to choke a courtroom, most agents would have flown home, written their reports, and moved on. But Talia Monroe wasn't most agents, and something still didn't sit right. Back in Quantico, while the media ran loops of the now iconic gas station raid, Talia sat in a quiet bureau office, reviewing something no one else had noticed. It was a transfer, a digital trail buried inside a seized burner phone. A payment. Not from a local business, not from the mechanic, but from a private security firm based in D.C. The same firm was contracted by a defense subcontractor known for building border surveillance tech. The deposit was time-stamped exactly 1 day before the fake sheriff's visit. Amount, $40,500. Labeled only, field facilitation. It didn't make sense. Why would a government-adjacent company be funneling money into a backwater drug and corruption ring? Unless, this wasn't just about civil rights violations. It was about covering federal malfeasance. Talia quietly requested a meeting with the Assistant Director of Intelligence. She laid it out plainly. This case had opened a new door, one with national implications. The small-town officers weren't just acting rogue, they were facilitating a channel, one that might have reached federal contractors, the kind that thrives on contracts, surveillance, and staying invisible. The director's face stayed still, but his eyes shifted. "You're saying they weren't just protecting drugs or cash. They were protecting a pipeline." Talia nodded. "And I think they were told to look the other way." That's when the tone changed. What had started as a local corruption probe had just escalated into an internal affairs conflict with federal oversight implications. Within 48 hours, Talia was given quiet clearance to pursue it, off the books. She wasn't just investigating criminals now. She was navigating the underbelly of bureaucracy, where power protected itself not with violence, but with red tape and silence. She traced the payment back through layered LLCs, fake addresses, and shell corporations, each one peeled back like a rotten onion. Eventually, it all led to one name: Orion Systems Group, a contractor specializing in domestic data filtration and site-level behavioral analysis. Translation: they helped monitor people at gas stations, airports, and highways without anyone knowing. And they had active contracts with DHS, ICE, and 3 state governments. Now it made sense. The gas station wasn't just a corruption site, it was a live testing environment for behavioral profiling software. Race, clothing, vehicle type, perceived agitation. It was all being tagged and analyzed. And the local cops? They were the human front for an algorithmic machine designed to label people as threats before they even spoke. Talia sat back in her chair, stunned. What had looked like racial profiling wasn't just ignorance or hate, it was engineered discrimination, packaged as predictive technology and sold to federal agencies. She brought the data to her supervisor. He looked like he'd been punched in the chest. "We're talking lawsuits, congressional hearings, maybe even criminal charges. Only," she said, "if the public finds out." And that's where the Bureau's silence began. Suddenly, her files were locked. Her clearance level changed. Her emails went unanswered. She wasn't being stopped outright, but she was being iced out. Quietly. Systematically. The very agency that had trusted her to infiltrate a town was now afraid of what she'd found. Most agents would have backed down. Talia didn't. She knew she couldn't go through traditional channels, so she took a risk. She reached out to someone outside the Bureau, a federal judge she'd once protected during a high-profile domestic terrorism case. Someone who owed her. Someone who had the authority to trigger a sealed oversight review without alerting internal actors. He listened, then asked one question. "Are you sure you want to pull this thread? It won't just cost people their jobs, it could change the game." "I didn't come this far to protect a game," she said. Within a week, a formal subpoena was issued to Orion Systems Group, under seal. Within 2 weeks, whistleblowers emerged. A former Orion engineer revealed that the profiling software had been tested in 6 states without civilian consent, and that, yes, race, body language, and agitation patterns were primary data points. The FBI could no longer pretend it wasn't real. The Bureau pivoted. Publicly, they doubled down on their original investigation. But behind the scenes, they quietly cleared Talia to testify. She wasn't just the undercover agent anymore. She was the key witness in a growing national scandal. Her prepared statement before a closed-door Senate committee was short, precise, and unforgettable. "I went undercover to investigate local racial profiling. What I found was a federally sanctioned program that turned suspicion into science, and used that science to target communities of color in the name of safety. What happened to me at that gas station wasn't just personal. It was programmed. The fallout was swift. Orion's contracts were frozen. DHS denied involvement, then reversed course and launched an internal review. News outlets picked up the trail. The narrative shifted. This wasn't just about dirty cops. It was about algorithmic injustice, bias embedded in data, and the failure of oversight to check power hiding behind code. Across YouTube and social media, the story surged again. New clips circulated, this time with the headline, "They mocked the black woman at the gas station. She exposed a nationwide surveillance scandal." TikTok creators stitched the original footage with an analysis of data bias. Twitter threads dissected Orion's business model. Reddit lit up with comparisons to dystopian fiction and reality. Civil rights attorneys began calling her the modern-day Erin Brockovich with a badge. But Talia never sought fame. She stayed off camera, gave no interviews. She didn't need the spotlight. Her job was done. Instead, she visited the town one last time. It had changed. The gas station was under new ownership. The people she'd once passed in silence now greeted her with hesitant gratitude. Some apologized. Others just nodded. The air felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because someone had finally said something. Back in her car, she opened her laptop one final time and typed her closing report. What began as a civil rights investigation ended as a digital ethics crisis. I was mocked, profiled, and underestimated. But none of that mattered. Because justice isn't just about punishment, it's about illumination. And sometimes all it takes to bring down a wall of silence is for one voice to refuse to stay quiet. She parked on the same patch of cracked pavement where it all began. The Sinclair gas station was gone now, razed and rebuilt under a new name, with bright lights, clean windows, and a large blue sign above the pumps that read, "Community First Fuel." It felt almost ironic, like the town was trying to rewrite its own memory. But Talia Monroe didn't need a monument. The real change was never in the concrete. It was in the people who walked past her now and looked twice, not in suspicion, but in recognition. A young woman stepped out of the new storefront, someone Talia didn't recognize. Maybe 19, maybe 20. She wore a lanyard with a name badge and a nervous kind of energy in her shoulders. She paused, then walked over. "Ma'am, are you the one who, from the videos?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. Talia smiled. "Depends on which video." The girl looked down, embarrassed. "The one where you just stood there and let them talk down to you. And then—" She shook her head. "You never raised your voice, but you brought them all down. That's what I remember." Talia simply said, "Sometimes the strongest voice is the one that waits." The girl nodded. "My brother got stopped here once, just for walking. I used to think there was nothing anyone could do about that kind of thing." She smiled now. "But you proved otherwise." Talia watched her walk back inside. For the first time in a long time, she felt something close to peace. Not because justice had been fully served. There were still contracts to be audited, policies to be challenged, systems to be redesigned, but because the silence had been broken. And sometimes, that's the most radical kind of justice. The case had sparked something bigger than arrests. Conversations about racial profiling, algorithmic bias, surveillance ethics, and police accountability were now making their way into boardrooms and courtrooms alike. Civil rights groups began demanding transparency from tech contractors. Lawmakers proposed new bills mandating ethical oversight on law enforcement software. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A real one. Talia returned to Quantico not as the woman who went undercover, but as the woman who redefined what undercover work could mean. Her story was now part of bureau training modules. How to expose corruption without compromising character. How to gather evidence without losing your humanity. But she didn't care much for legacy. That wasn't her goal. What she wanted, what she had always wanted, was for her presence to mean something, for her silence to carry weight, for her calm to be louder than fear. And in the end, it was. So to the ones who laughed at her at the gas station, who mocked her clothes, her voice, her silence, she didn't need to say, "I told you so," because they knew. And now the whole country did too. And to anyone watching this story unfold, wondering if their own voice matters in a world that sometimes doesn't want to listen, her answer is simple. Yes, it does. Even if you speak it through action, even if you whisper it through courage, even if all you do is stand still and refuse to disappear. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone tried to overlook.